Youth is a time filled with hopes, dreams, and endless possibilities. For Sarah and her high school friends, these years were no exception. They were bound by a deep friendship, sharing grand visions for life after graduation, though mingled with uncertainties and fear of the unknown. After high school, the bond of their friendship remained strong, even as time, distance, and chance began to shape their separate futures. For Sarah, life after school seemed less uncertain. Graduating with a first-class degree in software engineering, she secured a promising position in her father's thriving software company, Beta X. One evening after work, Sarah decided to take the bus home. As she approached the bus stop, she noticed a man huddled under a thin blanket on the sidewalk. His face looked familiar, but she needed to be sure. Leaning in for a closer look, her suspicions were confirmed. It was Jamil, a high school friend. Jamil had been one of the brightest students in their class. What could have brought him to this point? "Jamil, is that you?" Sarah asked gently. Jamil looked up, his eyes dull but recognizing her. "Sarah, I can't believe it's you. Are you okay? Where have you been all these years? What happened to you?" Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern. Jamil sighed, his voice thick with emotion. "I can't even tell how I got here, Sarah. This is where I ended up." Sarah's heart ached as she looked at the man who was once one of the brightest students in their class. "Can you walk?" she asked, reaching out her hand to him. They walked to a nearby eatery, where Sarah bought him a warm meal and hot coffee. As they ate, Jamil shared his story, how he had gotten involved with the wrong crowd after his parents divorced. He spoke of the lure of drugs, petty crimes, and the eventual incarceration that followed. After his release from prison, he had no family left, no home to return to. As Jamil recounted his story, Sarah's mind raced back to their high school days. She remembered the dreams they all had, the visions of bright futures that seemed so certain back then. Jamil had wanted to become a surgeon. The thought of how those dreams had degenerated into such a dehumanizing experience grieved her deeply. Sarah's heart was torn between the need for justice for those Jamil might have wronged, and the mercy he so clearly needed now. "Jamil, there's a space in our outbuilding. I'll talk to my parents about letting you stay there. Maybe we can start to figure out how to get you back on your feet," Sarah offered gently. Jamil's eyes filled with tears, his voice trembling. "Why would you help me after all I've done?" Sarah swallowed hard, struggling to hold back her own tears. "Jamil, you were one of my friends. Besides, everyone deserves a chance to make things right." When Sarah brought Jamil home, she had second thoughts. How would her parents react when they learned that Jamil had just been released from prison? And what if he wasn't truly reformed? But as she looked at Jamil's weary face, her doubts melted away. "Here we are," she said with a reassuring smile as she pushed open the front gate. Jamil nodded, his smile weak, betraying his anxiety about what Sarah's parents might think of him. Fortunately, Sarah's parents were not home yet. She led Jamil to a room that looked like a young boy's room. Jamil's eyes were immediately drawn to a portrait on the wall, a young man in his late 20s, smiling warmly. "That's my brother Ben. He was a Marine," Sarah explained. "I'm sorry," Jamil said respectfully. Just then, the sound of raised voices broke the silence. Sarah recognized her mother's voice, issuing yet another threat of divorce to her father, as she often did when provoked. Hurriedly, she joined them downstairs. As soon as her parents noticed her presence, they stopped arguing, trying to act as if nothing was wrong. But Sarah knew better. Still, with the delicate request she was about to make, she pretended not to notice the tension between them. Upstairs, Jamil waited anxiously, his heart pounding. "Oh God, please help me," he whispered to himself. The last time he had prayed was as a little child when his grandmother visited. Church, prayer, and faith had never appealed to him, not even in prison. But now, here he was, calling on the God he had long ignored. A wave of guilt washed over him, telling him that God wasn't listening. He found himself shivering, not from cold, but from fear. Fear of being sent back to the streets. He remembered a particularly cold night on the streets when he had considered committing another crime just to be sent back to jail, where he could at least have a roof over his head. Downstairs, Sarah braced herself for the inevitable confrontation. She knew her father would be easier to convince. Her mother, on the other hand, would be the harder nut to crack. Taking a deep breath, she turned to face her mother. "Mom, I ran into Jamil today. You remember him from high school? He's just been released from prison and has nowhere to go. He desperately needs help right now. So, how do you think we can help him?" her mother asked, her tone cold. "I brought him home to stay with us so we can—" "What?" her mother interrupted, her face tightening into a frown. "You mean I have a convicted felon in my house already?" Sarah was caught off guard. Realizing she had hit a brick wall, she turned to her father. "Daddy," she began, but emotion choked her words, and her eyes filled with tears. Her father's brow furrowed with concern, a mix of emotions playing across his face: wariness, uncertainty, and a hint of compassion. "I don't know, honey, but aren't you worried he might be dangerous?" Sarah shook her head emphatically. "No, Dad, that's just it. Jamil's changed. He made some bad choices back then, but he's really turned his life around. He just needs a chance, a fresh start. I promised him he could stay here for a few days until he gets back on his feet." Her father pressed his lips tightly together, undecided. Sarah pressed on. "Think about it, Daddy. If the roles were reversed, and it was me getting out of jail, wouldn't you want someone to give me that same opportunity?" Her mother, who had resigned from the conversation, suddenly interjected, "What he sowed is what he reaped. There's no reversing of roles here. You are not a felon." Sarah felt her frustration boiling over. She couldn't bear her mother being so judgmental in a situation like this. Here was someone who had made mistakes but was now in desperate need of a second chance. Speaking between sobs, she pointed towards the room where Jamil was waiting. "That boy got involved with the wrong crowd, trying to cope with his parents' divorce. Look around here and tell me it can't happen to me." Her mother quietly sat down, the weight of the words sinking in. Her father's inner conflict was clear as he wrestled with his fears and his desire to help. Finally, he sighed. "All right. He can stay, but I'm keeping a close eye on him." Sarah's face brightened into a smile of relief. She reached out and hugged her father gratefully. "Thank you, Dad. I promise you won't regret this." Jamil did not disappoint. He showed genuine interest in learning, helping out, and doing things right. His transformation was remarkable. Sarah's mother, who had been so resistant at first, soon became fond of him. Jamal reminded her of her late son Ben's undying spirit, how he had insisted on serving in the Navy despite the blood cancer that was slowly claiming his life. One morning during breakfast, Sarah's mother turned to Jamal and, to everyone's delight, announced, "Jamal, I found an organization that has a program to help people like you get back on their feet. They provide temporary housing, job training, and counseling." Jamal agreed to join the program. Over the next few months, he worked hard, attending all the training sessions, and eventually securing a job. Sarah watched as he transformed, not just externally but internally, finding his self-worth and purpose. A year later, Jamal stood at a podium at the organization's annual gala. Well-dressed and confident, he shared his story with the audience. "I was lost, but someone showed me mercy when I didn't think I deserved it. Sarah and her parents didn't just give me help, they gave me hope. They brought me back to life." The crowd erupted in cheerful applause. But the true applause came from within Sarah's heart. She saw firsthand how justice and mercy, mixed together, could turn a life around. In giving Jamal a second chance, she had upheld true justice, allowing righteousness to flow like a mighty stream, as the Word of God recommends in the book of Amos, chapter 5, verse 24.
"But let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream."
As Jamal stepped down from the podium, he walked straight to Sarah and her parents, who were seated in the front row. Tears filled Sarah's eyes as she stood up to embrace him. Her parents joined in, and the four of them stood together, united in a moment of profound gratitude and triumph. As the evening ended, Jamal looked at Sarah with deep gratitude. "Thank you, Sarah, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Sarah smiled. "You found your way back, Jamal. All I did was show you the door. You walked through it."
Jamal's journey from the streets to the stage was not just a story of one man's redemption, but a testament to the power of compassion and second chances. A reminder that a hand extended in kindness can pull someone from the depths of despair into a life of success. Remember, true justice is not only about enforcing the law, but also about offering redemption to those who seek it, about mercy that transforms lives.
If the story of Jamal's journey and Sarah's compassion touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to the Life Bible Stories channel. Let's work together to build a community of faith as we learn to live by the timeless truth and wisdom of the Bible.